righty, boys and girls, the boys are back in town. Welcome to another episode of the Red, White, Claret, and Blue Show with your no longer jet-lagged host, Alex, and Chris, Timon's alternate in the off-Broadway production of The Lion King Condit, back from the House of Mouse. We are, as always, your American villain voices, serving up the lukewarmiest of lukewarm opinions. Socials, show notes, listen, rate, subscribe, review. Good news, we finally have a legal department, so we are going to make an announcement. We are giving away, most likely, if we can get all of this sorted, Villa tickets to a match at next year's season at Villa Park, high-level hospitality. If you haven't listened to our interview with Paul Faulkner and Doug Wright, go do that because there's great info. But honestly, if you haven't by now, you're not going to. So you will not know that they are giving away via our podcast 2 tickets to a Villa match. We will announce probably in a month or so, probably around the North America Villa meetup in Charlotte, North Carolina, the rules around that contest and how you can potentially win. But these are the amazing seats that we got where we were able to meet people like Paul Faulkner, people like Peter With, who may or may not make an appearance on this podcast in the future if I ever contact him on Facebook again. And yeah, all we can say is
like Doug Wright. Don't leave out Doug.
Doug Wright as well. Just the greatest humans up in that hospitality and the greatest experience that you could possibly have. So stay tuned. That will be coming. We finally have rules and regulations. We just actually need to write those because we don't have a legal department. You are looking at him.
We have some assist from your lovely wife. That's what we've got, yes. and your job. But I will say about the tickets, not only are they great tickets, but Paul and Doug are legitimately 2 of the kindest people and most fun people that you could possibly see a game with. So it's a win-win all around. For them to have thrown that out to us was, again, a surprise. We talked about it, but not just the tickets to the game and not just the hospitality suite. I don't know that there are 2 people at Villa Park that I would rather watch the game with because they're just so great. They're wonderful people.
I couldn't agree more. Now, Chris, in the more recent past, you were at Disney with 2 children under the age of 5, or I guess 5.
Under 6. Walter is 5. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. 5 and under, we will say, is what I meant to get to. I assume they're passed out, but how has that been for you?
It was great. Walter is awake still, and he may, as he has before, make an appearance on this pod right now. But it was fun. The kids had such a great time. It was really worth it just because of that. And the things that they did. I mean, they fell asleep every day in the park because we wear them out. But the look on their faces when they met like Mickey Mouse and Joy and Sully from Monsters Inc. and all those things, like the looks on their faces is worth every nickel that we spent to get down there, which was a lot of nickels, just for the record. Many nickels to go there for a week. But totally worth it, just because of how much fun they had. Even if it's not really much of a vacation for my wife and I to cart those 2 around Disney, but it was a lot of fun. Couldn't have asked for a better time. I know we were talking about it off air, but I didn't hear any mention of the snowboarding trip other than how jet lagged you were in your solo pod. But how was the snowboarding trip in Japan?
It was, in a word, incredible. Beautiful country, incredibly kind, hospitable people. Food, amazing. The best ramen that I had in Tokyo, Kyoto, and Hakuba, where we were skiing, was actually in the lodge at the top of the mountain, believe it or not. But everything we ate was amazing. Every place we stayed was amazing. The conditions were incredible. I think I told you over text, base depth at some of these mountains was literally 12 feet of snow. They have had a historic winter, more snow than they've had in at least 30 years, potentially 100. Snowbanks in the town, 7.5 feet high. I mean, this was insane. I've made yearly pilgrimages out to the west coast of the United States, Vail, Aspen, Salt Lake City, Bend, Oregon, and I have never seen snow like this. So it was everything that we hoped it would be and then some.
Nice. That's great. And now we're here to talk about, will Spurs have a new manager by the time the game rolls around on Sunday and this pod becomes worthless?
You took the transitions over from me, and I really expected better from you. There were so many options.
Wait, what would you have gone with? No, what would you have gone with? Let's hear it.
From the House of Mouse to the House of Lions, from the happiest place on earth to kids to the happiest place on earth for us, from the far east going to the far west. We go from Japan to Birmingham. Come on, man. They're all right there for you. These are layups. But anyway,
I really do though. Off of the result today, because we're recording this on Thursday night, I do wonder if they're not going to have a caretaker manager, Tottenham Hotspur, by the time Sunday rolls around.
Yeah, the only reason why I would say why not. I mean, so here's what let's just get into it. We'll get into Ange in a moment when we talk about Spurs so far this season, because I think that parlays nicely into whether he'll be there or not. But Sunday home, 12:35 Eastern time. And I'll just say this before we get into what's going on with Spurs. All the stats do not make for good reading if you are a Villa fan. And I just have 4 here. One of these you texted to me, came up from Stato, but to put them all in
love Stato again.
Stat 1. Aston Villa have progressed from just one of their last 6 FA Cup ties against Tottenham, winning 1-0 at White Hart Lane in a third round replay after a goalless draw at Villa Park in the year I was born, 1992. Tottenham Hotspur have won 9 of their last 10 away games against Aston Villa in all competitions. That's more recent. They have lost 1 in a row, with their last 2 wins coming by the same 4-0 scoreline in April of 22 and March of 24. Aston Villa are looking to reach the 5th round of the FA Cup for the first time in a decade since the 2014-15 season, where we did reach the final before getting smashed 4-0 to Arsenal, and I had a bunch of Arsenal fans in Fidei making fun of me in a pub.
And almost got relegated that year as well. Fun
time. Yep. And then the last one, Tottenham have, good for them, have progressed from 4 of their last 5 FA Cup 4th round ties, although they did lose 1-0 against City in this stage last year, which was a pretty good result considering that City team. So let's put all that aside, all the history, and talk about Spurs so far this season. All right. It has been bad. You and I both predicted them to finish within the top 6, top 4, and our preseason predictions, once again, were atrocious. They are 14th. They, by all measures, have been bad. And yet, when you compare them with Villa on just an overarching metric level, I found a lot of these things interesting. So obviously they're 14th, Villa are 8th, and yet we have a -3 goal differential. They have a +11 goal differential. Now you might think, oh, well, maybe they've conceded a lot more goals. They have not. They have conceded the same amount of goals as Villa have. They have scored 11 more than us, or 14 more than us, I should say. And yet somehow they are 6 places below us in the table, fighting a relegation battle. Now, maybe you'd say, oh, well, they've probably scored in bunches in games and been shut out a bunch of other times. No, Chris, they have not. They have only been held scoreless 4 times this year. Villa, 6. 7 times, they have only scored once. Villa has done that 6 times, basically par on. They have 5 clean sheets. Villa has 3. So I guess they concede more in the games where they score more, I suppose. I mean, they do have the 6-3 loss to Liverpool. They've got a couple 4-3 losses in there. And so that's where some of this comes to play. But they also have already humbled us once this year, 4-1. They have been on an awful run since essentially Thanksgiving. Since the 28th of November, they've only won 7 in 20 with 9 losses. They're on an okay run now. They've won 3 of their last 5, but after winning 2 straight against Elfsborg and Brentford, they got smashed by Liverpool today. And each of the last couple times that they've won, again, those 7 wins in the 20 games, those actually did come in pairs of 2, 2, 2, 1, 2. And each time they won 2 games in a row, they wound up losing like the next 5. So it is, I can't explain it, why they're so much worse off than Villa when you look at all those numbers. You would think that they would be around us, probably a spot or 2 ahead in the table. But Chris, you are obviously the original disciple of the Church of Ange, so I'm going to concede the floor to you and ask you what's going on.
So there are a couple ideas that I have when I was looking at statistics, and I've seen a decent amount of at least portions of their games. I'm not going to sit there and tell you that I've sat and watched all 90 minutes of any or many Spurs games, but the first thing is, if you want to talk about Ange Postecoglou and his style of play, one of the reasons that they have so many goals scored is because he is like Unai Emery on steroids, in that he is always going to worry about scoring more than he's worrying about defending. And if where we say Emery would always rather win 3-2 than 1-0, Ange would rather win 5-3 than 2-1, or vice versa. He always wants his players attacking. And that, I think, is one of the frustrations he has this season, is the level of intensity that the team is showing is not up to what he has as a standard. And you can question whether or not that style of play suits the English game or not. But there's no question that there is frustration boiling up between Postecoglou and the fans, between the players and the fans, potentially, I don't know, but potentially between Postecoglou and the players. I know that there was some finger pointing back and forth on the pitch today in the highlights that I saw with guys going at each other a little bit during their game, where they just got completely undressed by Liverpool in a really embarrassing way. So things are going very badly there, which is not necessarily the case like we see at Villa, where Villa's certainly had our struggles this season, but you don't see the team falling apart. You don't see the team and the fans turning on Unai Emery. That really is not happening. But so one of the reasons that I think they struggle, Spurs, is their defending. Number one, they have virtually no healthy center backs right now. And even when they had healthy players, their defending has not been good. The bad news for them is they have that 11 goal differential, right? Plus 11 goal differential. They should be much closer to even money. Their XG, they are massively overperforming their XG defensively. They should have conceded 10 more goals from who scored. So, that's not the be all end all, but it is an indicator of where they are defensively to me. I'm not a guy that just says, well, XG says this, so it must be the truth, because you're not just playing the game on a spreadsheet, but it is at least in a signpost, so to speak, of potential problems within the defensive organization of the team. And I think that's their biggest issue right now, is they're giving up too many chances and too many big chances against their opponents. The question for us, at least one of the questions for us here today to answer, is, can Villa exploit those potential opportunities? Because their Spurs are struggling all over the pitch and they have nobody healthy. So there's no reason that Aston Villa shouldn't get plenty of bites at the apple.
Yeah, I mean, today they went back to the Ben Davies at center back experiment, which, now granted, I believe it was Van de Ven who went down in that first match against Villa. Ben Davies came in and we were saying attack him, and Villa never actually did it. So, we'll see if we kind of can create the opportunity to take advantage of that. You're right. Not only are there potentially questions about Ange's system in the English game? There are also questions about Ange overall as the obstinate manager that will not change.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter who he has available. It doesn't matter how successful his team is at it. He says, "This is my style. I'm going to press high. I'm going to attack quickly. I'm going to play with a high line." And results be damned. To your point, I almost feel like there was the game where what they lose two guys to red cards against Chelsea and still were going all out.
Mhm.
And it's almost like for him, I would rather lose. I would almost take it a step further of rather win 5-3 than 2-1. I would almost say that he is so principled. It almost feels like he would rather lose 4-2 playing his style than win 2-1 but be accused of parking the bus.
Mhm. Oh,
Um,
100%. Yeah.
which is a wild thing to think. I give Emery some grief on this podcast for probably being too attack minded instead of protecting our lead, and that's how we wind up with draws instead of wins or losses instead of draws. But I know that Emery always wants to do what it takes to win. There's
Mhm.
not this sort of principled nature of like almost willing to accept like a good loss. But you're right about the injuries. I mean, you look at it, at least from what I saw in terms of injury returns, theoretically, Vicario, Madison, Udagi, and Werner, all their injuries are to be reevaluated or expected return by Sunday. So they could have some reinforcements on their forward line. Um, Tell the new striker that somehow they were able to convince to join,
Yeah.
could potentially get his first start. Young player, obviously highly regarded. Who knows what he's going to do sort of in that system, but natural goal scorer, I suppose. Uh, and honestly, like it's kind of on Villa. I think as we transition, if you'll allow me to kind of the Villa side of things, um, almost to me, it's not a matter of who Spurs play. They've proven over the last couple seasons that Ange's system, for all the grief he gets for it, seems to work against Villa and Unai Emery.
Yep.
So for me, it's a question of, is Unai going to make the right tactical adjustments and put us out there with the right formation and the right approach to be able to attack what is clearly a weak Spurs team that has 3 days, 4 days fewer rest than
Mhm.
us after having played a semifinal for the EFL Cup. I mean, they're going to be tired. That they gave it all from a physical and mental perspective, and they got smacked at a
Mhm.
time when they're not looking good. So like confidence is low. So for me, I'll turn it over to you of like what you think that Emery and Villa are going to do, but like they're there for the taking. I just don't know if if we're the right team to do it.
Uh, Well, Villa are also not without injuries, right? We have significant injuries for this game, and we're a little bit hamstrung in terms of player availability. Some of the new guys are not, or at least one of the new guys is not going to be available because he's cup tied um, at a position of need. I might point out. So, but I agree with you that Spurs are there for the taking. I also think that there's a chance that Ange Postecoglou is managing for his job on Sunday. That if you come off of a defeat like that against Liverpool and then have a loss, and if it's a bad loss against Aston Villa in your next cup match, and you're 14th in the league, uh, I don't see a lot of owners willing to wait that out. And Daniel Levy is more patient than most, and a lot of times with his managers, but I don't think he's gonna. I think he'd pull the trigger pretty quick. But in terms of what Aston Villa can do, I think that they're twofold for me. Number one, you use your speed and attack to take advantage of the banged up back line of Spurs, and you create mismatches with the high line because you know they're going to play a high line. So you're going to use your midfield only because like this would be such a great game for Pau Torres if we could have him available that Pau to Tielemans sort of connection from the back to the midfield. Sorry if you heard Zuzu there, she's making her annual appearance here on the podcast. But that Pau to Tielemans to the top type of ball coming over, either a big ball forward or the line breaking direct pass to a wing or to the center forward. This game, I think, will be calling out for it. Unfortunately, that's not going to be available. So what I would expect is that you use the players you have, Tielemans and Onana, in the defensive midfield, and it's going to be key for those two players to bring the ball forward and find those opportunities to break the high line and break it quickly and create chances on the break that will allow Villa to hopefully dominate this game. That would be my plan. Do you have anything different to that, Alex?
Not so much different, but I guess what I'll add, uh, I think we have to be prepared to sit deep and play on the counter, for us to do our usual dominate possession, push them back, get the defense higher. First off, we're never good at breaking low blocks if we force them into that, but that's precisely what Spurs want us to do so that they can harry the back line. I talked in the last episode about some of Boubacar Kamara's deficiencies as a center back because of his natural midfielder instinct. And so if I'm Ange Postecoglou and I've got my new striker, my new young quick striker in there, I'm saying, move over. You're on him. And every chance that he steps up, you're in behind, and we're going to play you in behind to score. So if our defense gets too far up, if we're attacking too slowly, I think we leave ourselves vulnerable to the one thing that Spurs has available to them, and that is quickness on the counter. And then to your point, we're not really taking advantage of where they're weak, which is their center backs. They're slow. They're high line. So all I'd add on top is that if I'm Unai Emery, I'm telling the team to sit back 10 or 15 yards, soak up the pressure, keep them all in front of you. Don't let the Suns and the Tells in behind, and then you hit them on the break. Use the dribbling ability of Morgan Rogers. Use the pace of Ollie Watkins. Use Leon Bailey on the right side.
Ollie Watkins isn't going to be available, though, is he? I don't think Watkins is going to play.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Good point. Use the pace of Daniel Mallon, who is another very quick player. Good shout. Yep. To get in behind and ultimately, create opportunities that way. So I'm like you. I want Yori to make a turn. I want Tielemans. I want Rogers on the dribble. I want Mallon and Bailey and JJ trying to get in behind these defenders, and that's how I'm creating my opportunities.
Marcus Rashford is also going to be available for this game, by the way. He is not cup tied for United.
So lineups, good transition. So my back four, I have I assume Matt Cash is back for this one. I think it was a minor injury. But if he's not, then I think we probably see Garcia start again at right back, but one of those two. Honestly, I think it's relatively inconsequential. We have Kansa, we have Kamara again as our two center backs. I could potentially see Ian Maatsen starting in this one just for a little bit of rotation. Unai seems willing to do that in these cup games. As our defensive midfielder pair, Yori and actually I think John McGinn might start with him in the midfield this game. Yeah. And then in front of them, I have Jacob Ramsey, Morgan Rogers in the middle, Leon Bailey on the right, and then Mallon up top. And the reason for that, I know you said Rashford is not cup tied. Obviously, we have Asensio as well. Unai has always seemed reticent to start new signings right off the bat, whether they've been off-season signings. We only saw Onana because Kamara was injured. And, that was kind of a surprise to us. But whenever we seem to bring in new guys, it's not like he integrates them right away. Very detail-oriented manager, has a lot of things that he wants them to do. And so bringing these guys in after 6 days in the club just seems quick to me for Unai. Now, I think if the game calls for it, we will see them off the bench. I do think that we'll see those names on the bench. But That's just why I don't have any of those new guys starting. The other one, I suppose, that is potentially a question, just because he's got the start in the last few, is Lamar Bogard. The reason why I don't start him, Unai might, but the reason why I don't start him, as we've said repeatedly, is he is an offensive liability. He's not just a net neutral; he is a liability. And with the pressing of Spurs and his inability to play a pass, that would just be such a weak spot. I just really don't want to see him in and around the lineup.
And he really struggled against Wolves. I mean, with that press, he had a rough go. So I have a similar lineup. I don't have Cash because I don't think, my last check was he's probably not going to be available for Sunday. But if he is, I think he'll be out there. But I've got Garcia. I have Luka Dean. Only because we have 6 days between games here, and we may be able to, I think, start a little bit stronger defensively with Luka Dean. I know he's not necessarily known as a great defender either, but he's better than Maatsen is tracking back to defend. And then I agree with you that McGinn probably makes the start over an Onana in defensive midfield for 2 reasons. I don't know that Onana is still not – I don't think he's back to 100% fit. It doesn't seem like. He did come off the bench against Wolves. But I also think that what McGinn can do on the turn potentially against the press, like Spurs is going to – we assume Spurs is going to do. They always do. I think this game is sort of a good spot for him to be in alongside Tielemans. And then I, like you, have the same up top. I thought about maybe putting Rashford in to start and putting JJ on the bench, but I think you're probably right that Unai Emery doesn't usually bring in new guys that fast, and it's much more likely that we'll see Rashford, Asensio, those type players coming in off the bench. I think it'll be Malen up top out of necessity because we don't have anybody else at the moment to really play that
said
position.
that he doesn't want to play centrally, by the way. I think that's the one thing that people will shout for is Rashford down the middle, but he has supposedly come out and said he's not here to play striker. So
yeah, I mean, I assume we're going to play him on the left, right? Like he has for most of his life. Yeah. But so we are similar there. What do you have for a scoreline?
I have 2-0 Tottenham.
Oh, that would be a bad day. All right, man. I have 2-1 Villa. Because there's no way in hell we keep a clean sheet. But if we lose 2-0 coming off of this 4-0 beatdown from Liverpool from against Spurs, that'll be cataclysmic. There'll be people jumping off roofs.
Listen, I know that Wolves has played somewhat better under their interim manager, but I think my prediction is really being clouded by the fact that we just played a team that's conceded 52 times on the year, and we barely got a worthwhile attempt on target, let alone like a good goal scoring opportunity. Yeah, we got the one opportunity that was offsides, and that was really it. So as bad as Spurs defense is, it's better and more sophisticated than Wolves. I think that we've said their system is built to play against us, as much as they don't necessarily have their first choice striker out there. Son still plays for them. Tell is obviously highly rated, and we have this habit this season of playing down to our competition, and I just see us giving them a chance, I guess. But maybe I'm a little too pessimistic coming off of Sunday.
I don't disagree. Maybe the good news is that I wasn't able to watch the full game on Saturday because I was at Disney. That was our break day at the park, though, so I did get to watch some. But I wasn't watching it with my usual focus, but I can see it because that was one of the worst games we played this season by and large.
Yeah.
But I think that Spurs are in such disarray right now, and with the transfer window that has recently concluded, there's a lot more kind of upswing around Aston Villa right now, and regardless of whether or not players say they pay attention to the media or not, they do, and they see Twitter and they see all that, and so there's a lot of positivity going around, not just within the Villarati, but nationally and internationally. The media are talking about Aston Villa winning this transfer window. Whether or not we agree with that is another point. But you have to admit there's a lot of positivity out there, and it was some pretty shrewd business. But so I think that may play into it. You've got one team that maybe looks like they could have sort of righted the ship a little bit versus another one that made no moves virtually outside of Tell in January, and is sinking. So I hope that I'm right and that we get the win here, because it would be absolutely brutal to lose again in the fourth round, and to not, once you kind of get into the quarterfinals, now you're talking about a real cup run, and I think that'd be a good thing for the club and for the fans and all that.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I hope you're right. Like I said, I'm just I suppose I'm feeling a little pessimistic, but you do give a lot of reasons for why Villa should be optimistic. Now, from some hot optimism, let's pour a little bit of cold water on that, Chris, because it is time for cold, cold, cold water. So we've got 5 today that relate to the transfer window and sort of how Villa should be feeling. So first one, Chris, I obviously reviewed the transfers very scatterbrainedly earlier this week, but why don't you give me your lukewarm rating of the transfer window? And if you've got any comments on specific transfers or how Villa should be thinking about them, I'll cede the floor to you.
So are we rating on a scale of 10? Is that what we're rating on here?
Do it on like a letter grade rating.
All right.
A,
All right. That's,
B.
yeah. A letter grade, I would give it like a B, B minus. And that's like, I think people are gonna think that's very lukewarm. And there's some reasons for that. Like, I'm down about selling John Duran, right? You and I both have talked about what huge fans of his we are and how special we think he is. I'm down about that, but I also understand it with the business that has come out since about how that deal went down and everything. So I do understand the business side of it, and it does clear up, PSR and put the club in a decent position. I am opposed to the reported percentage of wages that Villa are paying for Marcus Rashford, because that's an obscene amount of money for a guy that, you hope plays well, and you hope can recapture the type of player that we know he can be. And he's 27 years old. It's not like he's an old guy coming in at the end of his career. He still should be in the prime of his career. And if anybody can get a tune out of him, it's going to be Unai Emery. But I don't like how much risk we've assumed there financially when we don't know the payoff. So that affects my letter grade. Otherwise, though, I think it's generally pretty positive. Getting Disasi in, getting super hot Marco Asensio in, and Daniel Malen, like win right there, and all on relatively, either loans or a relatively cheap buy. Positives. So that outweighs the 2 negatives for me. And look, if I'm wrong and Emery gets Marcus Rashford playing amazing football, then that can change the letter grade in the future. But so I guess right now it's B minus, contingent on the play we get out of the splash name that came in through the end of the window there.
Yeah, I said B minus with the opportunity for extra credit. You get a bad grade, but like your teacher lets you do like an extra assignment to do it better. Like if Rashford and
guy to
Asensio,
call a B minus a bad grade, by the way.
you know where I went to school. it's just like anybody who's acting like these guys aren't risks, I don't think is being honest with themselves. Neither guy has really touched a ball since October, November. And like, there's a reason for that. As I said on Monday, there is a reason why multiple managers now have quit on Marcus Rashford. And if he couldn't do that for his boyhood club, I, I'm I'm perplexed as to why people think that he's all of a sudden going to turn around for Villa. He's worked with some really good managers. Unai Emery is another really good manager. I get it, and he's got a different way of reaching players. And all the tunes coming out of Marcus Rashford's camp say he's going to be the one. He's willing to listen to Emery. Like really excited to work with him. Awesome. Asensio went on a free transfer to PSG in a little over a year. They're done with him. Couldn't play him for 2 months, and now 3 months, and now he's with Villa. So, like these guys aren't the players that they were a couple years ago. I think my added thing with the Rashford component of it, though, is that with the buyout, with the buy clause at 40, 45 million, whatever it is, and his wages being what they are, I don't see him taking a 50% pay cut to all of a sudden get in line with our wage structure. So that means that buy clause probably is not being enacted. It's kind of there for show. Um, and if he does well, then we're just sending him back to a potentially rejuvenated Manchester United. I don't see a path to him potentially becoming a full-time player at Aston Villa. I think that if he does well, I've kind of learned my lessons from the Coutinho saga. Take the good loan and then just send him back and let them deal with him. So maybe that's the best case scenario for all this. But anyway, so that's why I think the risks bring me down to B minus. And we're going to get into, I think, a little bit more of that in these subsequent cold water takes, why I'm at a B minus. But if these guys come off and play well, then that's the extra credit that ultimately could push this towards an A transfer window for me.
Yeah, 100%. Yep.
So cold water point number 2, Villa panic bought at the end of the window, and there clearly wasn't a plan. Or if you want to look at it from the other end, another hot take that's kind of the opposite side of this is Monchi is an absolute genius and we should all worship at his feet.
I'm going to pour cold water on both those. I mean, although I do think Monchi is a very smart fella, and does do very well. I refuse to believe there wasn't a plan. Like just with the way Unai Emery approaches his life, and how consumed he is with this football club, and it's not unique to Aston Villa. It's just how he operates. I refuse to believe that there wasn't a plan of sorts. I think that it just was a matter of a lot of dominoes falling in place at certain times, and those dominoes then led to other things happening. So, like, I think one of the things that everyone virtually on the internet is guilty of is forgetting that there's not just one side on a negotiating table. That it's not just Aston Villa trying to get a player. It's Aston Villa trying to get a player, another team in negotiation, probably in negotiations with other clubs at the same time, the player, the agents, all those things. Like there are so many moving parts to these things that it's not usually just easy to snap your fingers and go. So I think that like the Mullen was pretty cut and dry. There was some hold up from his club that they wanted more fees. You have to negotiate that. But then once the Duran domino fell, that's sort of what precipitated all these other moves, right? Because that's what caused the whole avalanche of things to come. And with the Sazi, I mean, that one, again, another one's pretty cut and dry. Chelsea didn't want him to come here. Chelsea wanted him to go somewhere else. And I think some of that is some bad blood from past deals because, look, let's be honest. In the past, Aston Villa have taken advantage of, in the recent past, Aston Villa have taken advantage of Chelsea in the sale of Carney Chukwuemeka, and in
They're
the
about to make a 10 million profit on him if Dortmund makes that deal permanent.
yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, but still, and that would be great for Chelsea if that happened.
Yeah.
But still, they bought a player who was virtually never used for 20 million pound or near to it. And then the player swapping over the summer, that worked out more in Villa's favor, right? So I think there's some bad blood there with Big Todd and the boys, and they didn't want Desazi to come here, and he only wanted to come here. So again, that was sort of what I'm talking about with you have to remember all of the moving parts. Like we're Aston Villa fans. We want the best for Aston Villa all the time. It's not that easy to get these deals over the line, and it's not as easy as it looks on FIFA or Football Manager or whatever. These are real human beings with emotions at all levels of the negotiating table. So you have to remember that as you think about these things. That was a very long answer, but it's something you and I have talked about at length.
It's very well put. I also pour cold water on both of these, but if you look at it as a continuum from panic buy no plan to Monchi genius plan this all out from day one, I'm probably more towards the former on the spectrum than the latter, and here's why. Everything you say is right. There are two sides to every negotiation and all that kind of stuff, but Villa has traditionally proven themselves to be a team that gets their business done early. Kind of like with Jack Grealish, we bought the guys before we ultimately sold him, right? And you saw that fall apart a bit during this transfer window. Why did Dortmund want more money from Malen? Because we let the Philogene info leak and got too far down the line there, and they saw the money that we were getting for him. And like you and I said on this podcast, said, hold up, wait a minute. This is a Champions League finalist and a 21-year-old that can't get game time for you. We want more money for the Champions League finalist. Yes, the Duran sale precipitated all the loans. I think that we've heard enough throughout the transfer window, though, that Villa wanted an attacker regardless, and we knew that we needed a defender regardless. Now, perhaps Villa were in more PSR trouble than we thought and simply couldn't make those loans happen without a windfall of cash coming in. But I said this in at least with you, and I think in our group chat with the rest of the Raleigh Villains, that every negotiation becomes harder once teams know that you have that Duran money. Manchester United, maybe we were talking 50-50 split of the wages, and then all of a sudden they see that we have the Duran money and they're like, hey, you know what? Like, you guys can afford to do 75 and give us a 5 million loan fee. So I think that the way we've gone about the business, yes, maybe we had to sell and announce these things when we did for a variety of other reasons because the other person walks away. But it still leads me to believe that had we made some different decisions earlier in the window, perhaps we could have brought these guys in instead of kind of having this rush of guys at the end the way that we did.
I mean, that could be true. I'm going to chop up where you said everything you say is right. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, that's going to be the social post. All right, next one. Unai Emery actually wanted to choose John Duran over Ollie Watkins, and his plans were foiled by Arsenal.
I pour cold water on the last part. I don't think it was necessarily foiled by Arsenal. Maybe to an extent, but I don't pour a lot of cold water on that. No, I think that Unai Emery would have preferred to sell Watkins to Duran. I think that's relatively clear. They offered £60 million allegedly to Arsenal for Watkins, and Arsenal, because they are hilariously bad at negotiating in transfer windows, said, no, we'll give you 40. And Villa said, no, see you later. And, I think that Arsenal, kind of like I just said, you have to think about other aspects at the negotiating table. I don't think Arsenal ever realizes that anyone else in the world exists around the transfer window because they seem so bad at this. Except for the time that they let Manchester City drive up the price of Declan Rice and Arsenal were really just outbidding themselves. No one else was going to pay that money for him. Now he's been worth it. But anyway, there's the nicest thing I'll say about Declan Rice. But so Arsenal did think they were going to be able to take advantage of Villa's need to sell someone, and Villa just found a better buyer in Saudi Arabia. And frankly, like, as much as it stinks to sell John Duran, you'd much rather sell John Duran to Saudi Arabia than you would Ollie Watkins to Arsenal, really. You keep him out of England, and he'll probably score 1,000 goals. But I'm talking about John Duran now. He'll probably score 1,000 goals in Saudi Arabia, but at least it won't be against Aston Villa. It'll be against some teams you've never heard of. So, like, I think that this was Unai Emery's plan all along. This was the backup. Like, if we can't sell Watkins, we sell Duran outside of England, and that's what happened.
Yeah, I'm going to jump ahead a second, and our next one was Villa were in more PSR trouble than we thought. I'm actually not pouring much cold water on that. I think that it is evident with the deals that we made that if we weren't in PSR trouble now, I'll give Monchi a lot of credit. Looking ahead to the business that we needed to do in January and needed to do in the summer, we would be in a lot of PSR trouble. And so instead of winding up with a situation like with Douglas Luiz, where we needed to make the sale at the last minute at, a cut price valuation, he wanted to say, listen, I want to have the money in the coffer so that no one has us over a barrel in June. So
Kamara is the player that you're thinking about there, right? Kamara. That's the player.
Yeah, probably. And so he wanted to make sure that he had the money for all of that. And so that's why we saw a big sale in January. And so I do think that Unai Emery would have preferred to have John Duran than Ollie Watkins if you just look at the timeline that has been reported by multiple people out there, David Ornstein, Matt Law, et cetera, et cetera.
Good reporting. Good reporting. Yeah.
Good, solid reporting with all the facts. Aston Villa offered Arsenal the opportunity to start a conversation for Ollie Watkins at £60 million. Arsenal said 40 million. And in the time when Villa received that offer, obviously pissed everybody off in advance of the last Champions League game. All of a sudden, Al Nassr swoops in and says, hey, we'll give you 80 million for John Duran. And Villa says, damn it, all right, like we'll take it. It's more money. You go to Saudi Arabia, obviously, as you said, like it's the best case scenario. But I think now I kind of understand Unai Emery's frustration a little bit more in those last press conferences when he said, I want John Duran to be here. I think there was probably back channel communication to John Duran. And as I said in the last podcast, I think he's got a really bad agent that saw dollar signs. And so, yeah, I think they made the logical decision that we all thought was going to be the thing of, listen, John Duran is the future. He's 21. He's a phenom. Ollie Watkins is 29, not performing his best this season. And as much as he is a good fit for everything Unai Emery wants him to do, if we can get 60 million for him, even as opposed to 80 for John Duran,
or even that's 50,
probably, just like a smarter decision to make. So I do think that Unai Emery and Aston Villa actually would have preferred John Duran to stay and Ollie Watkins to go. Ultimately, though, to your point, two people in every negotiation. And when Arsenal comes in that low with a counteroffer, trying to exploit PSR and pissing everybody off in ahead of the Champions League game, and someone comes in with double that money, you got to take that money because who knows? Al Nassr were negotiating between John Duran and Victor Boniface out of Italy. And so you don't know if the next day they're going to come to an agreement with him. And so I think that's why Villa needed to move when they did.
And 40 million for Ollie Watkins is embarrassingly low. Like, that's insulting. Yes. When someone comes in with an offer like that, you just get up and say, okay, we're done now. And that sounds like what happened, from the reporting that we've seen. I mean, that's just it's really bad business to negotiate that way. And it makes people less inclined to do business with you. And that is true across any sport. There's a reason that you see teams that make a lot of deals together, or that you see teams make a lot of deals with certain clubs or whatever. Take it across sports, because there are people who know that there are good negotiators and there are jerks, and it's pretty clear that which category Arsenal fall into here.
Yep. Do
So.
you have anything else to add to the Villa being in more PSR trouble than we thought?
I don't think, I don't like the wording of it, I guess, because I don't think that they were necessarily in PSR trouble right now. I think they'd be in a position in the summer where you would have to sell a player, like you saw last summer. But I think they would have cleared PSR for the season, but then you would have to have the sale before the next financial year starts. What, June 1st or whatever it is, or June 30th. So I understand why the deal was done, because when you get that kind of offer for that kind of profit that goes right into the book, you can't turn it down, really, if you've got nothing else. And like, you made a really great point, that this then eases the pressure going into the offseason, looking ahead, because we won't have to have that. I mean, that Douglas Luiz sale was something of a panic sale, because it literally had to get done or we're facing a PSR violation. So we didn't want to be in that position again. And like I said, I think the player that Monchi, I think this is based on my speculation, what I've read. It's Boubacar Kamara is the player that they are targeting to sign long term and keep at the club, which I think is a huge key, because I think you and I both agree in this case that Kamara has been, if not Villa's best player this season, certainly one of their best players this season. So if you put it to me and said you can only keep one, Duran or Kamara, I can understand why you'd make the case for Kamara. And I know, again, I've given a really long answer, and it's probably because I haven't done a pod in like a week and a half.
You
I
missed.
I think that's the reason this was done. And I think it makes a lot of sense if you put it all in the big picture. And frankly, like, this is a really nerdy thing to say, but I can't wait for the company's house reporting to come out so that I can actually get a look at the book and see what it looks like here for the next season. So, you know, I again, I hesitate to say PSR trouble. I think it was an expected challenge that they saw an opportunity for an early exit ramp.
That's fair. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So, final one for Coldwater. The 3 players Villa should register for the Champions League should be blank, blank, and blank.
I think, boy, I think at first I was going to come in here and say I think it's pretty easy to pick, and now I'm second guessing myself. I think it's going to be Disasi out of need, because we're so banged up at center back. Asensio, because he's a Champions League winner. Rashford. I think those are the 3. What do you think they're going to do, Alex?
So I think it's very easy to say that Garcia is going to be left out. Yeah. We don't. There's enough versatility between Matt Cash, Ezri Konsa, Disasi also can play right back.
Yeah.
Just
Bogart.
Bogart, like, don't need to register him. Yeah. So then it becomes curious of the 4 guys, which of the 3 that you pick, because all 4 said in their like introductory interviews that playing in the Champions League was one of the reasons that they came to Villa. I think that it is going to be Disasi, Malen, and then one of Rashford or Asensio. If it was me, I would pick Rashford, and here's why. So first off, why Malen choice over Rashford and Asensio? Malen is our player. We own him.
That's
He
true.
will be with us after this season. And to have someone come with that as the objective and then immediately tell them nah and have this be a person that now you need to have under contract for the next 4 years, I feel like is just really poor management.
That makes
Um,
sense.
but, but from a tactical perspective, Asensio really can only play that attacking midfielder role. Rashford at least can play on both wings and striker, but as I said earlier, he said, I don't want to play striker. I don't want to play down the middle. And as far as I'm aware, he hasn't in a long time.
Mhm.
So now that you've sold John Duran and you have Ollie Watkins, who is banged up as we speak, who knows what's going to happen? Groin injuries are really difficult in this sport with your body mechanics and all that kind of stuff, really high risk for re-aggravation. Who's going to play striker if Ollie Watkins goes down? It seems like Daniel Mallon is the only person that can play down the middle that we have. So that's why I'm taking Daniel Mallon over Rashford and Asensio. And then you probably got it right there. I'm taking Rashford instead of Asensio just because he's got more positional versatility. We can move him around the field a little bit more. That being said, to your point, Asensio Champions League winner. We do have a lot of guys now that can play in that right wing, left wing spot. So maybe Rashford becomes superfluous.
Yeah.
But I think it's also really tough to say that both of those guys get in over Malen
I didn't think about
or
that
I
contract
guess
situation. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
over. Well, I'll also add this. It's hard for me to say that both those guys get in over Malen for the same reason that I mentioned earlier that I give this thing a B minus. Neither of them have played in
Yeah.
almost 3 months.
And Malen looked
So
lively. Like Malen was one of the
yeah,
few players on Saturday that looked lively.
He's
Yeah.
played all year. He was in the Champions League final last year. He's the only one who can play down the middle. He's the only one who's with us long term. I don't see how you sacrifice that for two very big what ifs.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's a good point. Probably better
So
point than mine.
I usually make better points than you. Anyway, that is where we will call it today on that amazing point by me. We will have a new pod out probably on Monday evening because once this game ends, Chris's kids will be awake. We will no longer have the protection of nap time. And then Sunday evening is the Super Bowl, and I will be glued to my TV. Go Birds. I've already taken Saquon to record 100 yards and the Eagles to win at plus 210. So there's my
Nice.
betting for all of you. Chris, anything else for the Villarati before we hop out of here?
I'm all good. Up the Villa.
All right. Well, up the Villa. Hi, Mom and Dad.